Hey everybody, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. Now, one of the things that we face as street photographers is finding a good quality of light under which to shoot. And sometimes we just don't get out in those early morning hours or stay out late enough to take advantage of a great afternoon light for any variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's just we wanted to sleep in late, or we're out with people who aren't photographers who have no appreciation or understanding as to why you want to linger for a little longer to take advantage of some street scene because the light is just so sweet when everyone else is tired and hungry. You've probably experienced it. I know I have countless times. But when I see a photograph that really leverages quality light, man, there is nothing like it. And I chose three images that really adeptly use light to produce really remarkable images. All right, here we have a shot by Red Cosmonaut Girl. Now, this shot is all about the quality of light. We have what's probably late afternoon light. It creates the shadow of the word circus against this wall. It illuminates this man's face, who's in profile, against the area of the wall. We got this really interesting play of light here, which I'm not sure how to exactly read, but is nevertheless a nice flourish. We have the light that's illuminating part of the umbrella here. Part of the light off the wall seems to be bouncing and illuminating the top of the umbrella. We have this wall here, what looks to be another figure in shadow. We have the light hitting the spire or this antenna and this building in the back. Now, this is a scene that is all about the quality of the light. Had this scene been photographed during the middle of the day, when the light was overhead, this scene would not look like this. This area would either be awash in light or it would be awash in shadow. It would not be as visually interesting and as arresting as it is right now. And that's why I think it's so important when you go out, if you can manage it, to try and explore when the light is going to be really good. Early morning, late afternoon. Going out in the middle of the day is, I think, something that a lot of us end up doing just because scheduling or because we're with other people whose priority is anything else but photography. But as photographers, when you really want to create the best photograph possible, man, you really increase your chances when the light is phenomenal, which it is in this case. I just love the way the colors pop, the red of his shirt, the orange of the umbrella, the blue sky. All of those elements provide small little accents and flourishes that play off of the light. Obviously, the word circus is a big graphic element in this shot, but it's not the only thing that makes this shot interesting. It's the way the light is used to illuminate all those various elements that I already pointed out that make a shot that immediately arrests my attention. And this is a shot that's only possible by working with really a great quality of light. Okay, here we have a shot by Alan Shulik. This was created with a Leica M8 at 1/2000th of a second at 160 ISO. We don't have an f-stop for this. Now, this scene is another scene where we have some really interesting light happening. Now, the light seems to be coming from above, almost directly overhead, maybe slightly to the right. By observing what's happening here in terms of the shadow, with this sort of star structure here, you can see that this area here is in shadow and that the light seems to be coming from above. It's obviously passing through the flags, which allows the color of the blue and the red stripes to really pop. You're also dealing with the light that's falling on these tables here, and then there's some light here that's falling. There's some shadow that appears here on the left-hand side. You can see here we have these other banners here, and you can see the light falling on the wall here. So it looks as if that the light is coming from overhead and maybe slightly to the left and creating the shadows here, and that there seems to be some sort of structure that is throwing this area into shade. So unlike the previous shot, we're not dealing with light that's really relatively low on the horizon. It's still relatively high in the sky, But in this particular scene, Alan uses it to great effect because there are so many elements that are elevated above eye level. So he's able to look up and use the light in a variety of different ways. First, the light that shines through the flags. So we get this vibrancy to the colors of the flags as a result. Because of these strong patterns that are on these sort of umbrella-like structures at these tables, and because of the slight curve, you get those shadows that appear here and here that help to provide some depth to it. You also see what happens here in terms of the banners here and the shadow play that happens on the green area of the fences. And you can also see some light play and shadow play here on these tables in this area here where it's brightly lit and here where it's relegated to more open shade. And what's interesting is that the light is doing so many things. He's working with the very same light source, but because of the relative position of all these various elements in the scene, the light is made to perform or to be revealed in very different ways because of how it interacts with the various elements in the scene. I mean, this shot is obviously awash in some very vibrant, saturated colors. There are some very, very strong shapes that repeat themselves over and over and over again. We have some great lines and graphic elements throughout this composition that make for a really interesting shot. But again, it's the light that helps make that difference. If this area had it been shot in the early morning or the late afternoon, it still may have been an interesting shot, but a lot of these elements would have been rendered in a completely different way. And so my point in choosing this image, as much as I am suggesting that getting up a little early or staying around a little later can be really important to make an effective photograph, regardless of when you go out, paying careful attention to the light, any quality of light, any light that's coming from wherever it's coming from, if you're observant about not just where the light is coming from, but how it's interacting with all the various elements in the scene, you can discover things that most people would be completely oblivious to, and that offer you a potential as a photographer that even other photographers might not recognize in the moment. Because, there's just a bunch of empty tables with a bunch of flags. Most people would not look at this scene and see it for the extraordinary thing that it is. But Alan here doesn't, and because he leveraged the light in the way that he did, he produced a really wonderful photograph. Next, we have Michelle Rick, one of my favorite New York photographers. And she don't have any active data here. So here's a scene which I assume is in New York because Michelle lives in New York. And look at the light here as this guy passes through this scene and his shadow is cast on this door to this, what I assume is a restaurant. Now, this is sort of a typical city scene, street photography scene, right? People walking down the street, and we create a photograph juxtaposing them passing by against some element in the background. Now, storefronts, billboards, window fronts, all these things are fodder for street photographers. We're constantly shooting people walking past scenes. But how do you make that more interesting? How do you keep it from being redundant and boring, right? For me, the key is what's happening with the light. And by using either the early morning or the late afternoon light, Michelle here is able to make something really interesting because we have this play of shadow. This guy in the hat with his hands behind his back moves into the scene and creates this really sort of crooked man shadow against this expanse of red on the door, which is a really nice element, right? But then on top of that, we get the gesture of the hands, the way he's clasping his wrist, the way his white hair peeks out from underneath the cap of his hat, the repeating shapes of the doorway here, the doorway here, the lines and shapes created by the sidewalk and the building behind. This shot is about light and shadow. It is about color. It is about line and shape. It is about gesture. All those elements I've talked about endlessly in these videos about the more of those elements that you have in a composition, the greater chance you have of creating a really exceptional shot. But if you start off with nothing else but great light, sometimes that alone can still make for a really interesting photograph, even if you don't have those other things. But when you do have those other things, man, it's just magic. And that's the biggest challenge for us as street photographers, is finding scenes where we use as many of those elements, light and shadow, line and shape, color and gesture, in creating a composition. That's why you have to learn to start seeing the world, not literally, but graphically. Observe it based on those visual characteristics, and you'll start seeing the world in a completely different way, which will inform how you compose a shot and what you choose to include or exclude from the frame. And as you practice this over and over and over again, you will no doubt eventually see a real difference in your photography. And when that happens, man, you are in that zone and you're having so much fun and you can derive so much joy from making photographs. I hope you found that helpful. If you are finding us for the first time and you've never heard of the Candid Frame is a podcast in which I interview photographers about their work and career. And I've interviewed hundreds of photographers. And most recently, I interviewed photographer Jeff Mermelstein, who is one of the best living street photographers around. He's phenomenal. And if you don't know him and you're not familiar with his work, well, use this episode of the podcast to remedy that. And listen to this conversation and check out his work. He is an amazing, amazing talent. And he's sort of a photographer's photographer. A lot of photographers know about him, but the general public doesn't. Other names like Jay Maisel or Joel Meyerowitz may come to mind for a lot of people, but Jeff ranks up there easily for me. So check out the episode by either streaming it here on YouTube, or you can go to the Candid Frame and stream it there, or even better, download the free Candid Frame app, which gives you access to the entire archive of interviews. And if you want to contribute images to the Candid Frame Flickr Pool, all you need to do is go to Flickr on your computer and just do a search on the Candid Frame and ask to be added, and I'll be glad to do so. Don't try and do it on your phone or tablet, because you'll get a message that it's a private group and you can't be a member of it. Just ignore that. Just go to your computer, ask to be added, and I'll be more than glad to do so. So, thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.